all of these people who were involved in these, quote, parties were seemingly hardworking family men, I would imagine they can't all be present at the time. They have jobs, they have different schedules. It's probably very in and out. Or maybe some of the men he knew in that group had just broken off into a smaller group, a group of people who weren't satisfied enough by the assaulting of their victims and the torture of the victims, but that the assaults were more like a gateway drug for them. And then they created their new little subgroup where they wanted to cross over into murder. Mr. B also claimed that when it came to finding their victims, sometimes they wouldn't even have to go out driving to find them. Sometimes they would meet them in places like gay bars in town. And if you remember, witnesses said both Alan and Neil were seen at those bars before their deaths. So could they have crossed paths with Bevan or with one of his associates in the family there? Maybe. And those two are just part of the bigger picture, right? Alan was hitchhiking. Mark was more than likely hitchhiking. Peter could have been too, or maybe he was just simply walking when a car full of people convinced him to get in. And then there's Neil. He knew Bevan. But Neil was also a sex worker, so that could have made him more trusting if an old fling offered him a ride. Or, I guess, even more vulnerable if one of Bevan's associates or family members posed as a potential client. Bevan would have known Neil's work. And according to Mr. B, he could have easily told the group that it would be simple to lure him into one of these so-called parties, all under the guise of it being a potential job for him. So all of that to say, it's not hard to imagine that every single victim could have crossed paths with Bevan or his alleged associates at some point. And when you really think about it, it is just so haunting and eerie. A secret network of well-known, respected people just committing these horrific crimes right in their own community. So finally, now being armed with all of this information about Bevan, the investigators finally got it together and they were able to do a search of his home. And what they found, it was just the cherry on top of this investigation. There were, yes, sleeping pills, but then there was the fact that there were hairs and other fibers tested from Bevan's house that matched fibers found on Richard's body. Richard, the 15-year-old kidnapped and murdered after walking home from. Finally, on November 3rd, 1983, Bevan was arrested. But the news was bittersweet because he only had been charged with Richard's murder. The following year, he was found guilty and he was sentenced to life in prison, which it was a moment of relief and justice for Richard's family and friends. But for the families of the other victims, it kind of felt like a slap in the face. Their loved ones' cases were still unsolved, and the man that they believed was responsible was not going to be held accountable for them. But a few years later, in 1989, there was another break, and Bevan was actually charged with the murders of Alan and Mark. But because the only evidence that the investigators were able to bring forward was the fact that the murders were so similar to Richard's, which was all circumstantial evidence, because of that, the charges were sadly withdrawn. And to this day, the murders of Alan, Mark, Peter, and Neil are still unsolved. But there are plenty of theories surrounding their deaths, because many people do think that Bevan killed all of them. Others are inclined to believe that Bevan and a group of just deviants were responsible for all of the deaths, that they all worked together, that they all were a part of this and complicit. Which, of course, if that's true, that would leave a lot of very dangerous people out there who know the truth about what happened to those boys and young men. Now, it's also really important to note that the investigators apparently never really gave a lot of thought to this theory of a group of people being murderers. And even though Mr. B was granted immunity due to the kinds of things that he had admitted to,